If you're a bit too online, happen to be on TikTok around 2023, or care about stan culture, there's a good chance that you've come across Gaylors. Gaylors are fans of pop sensation Taylor Swift who spend their time talking about how Taylor Swift is totally a lesbian or at least a little bi. Some of the people who engage in this, making gay the tay, are just having themselves a bit of fun. They don't take it that seriously. For other people, this is super serial, you guys. It's Tony Tiger in a cape offering Frosted Flakes cereal. Gaylors by and large get a bad rap. Some of their members engage in conspiracism. A handful grew angry at Taylor when it seemed like she said they were wrong and maybe weird to force a narrative on her in her personal life. A decent amount of laughter is had at their expense due to how outwardly heterosexual Taylor expresses herself. In my video on the dehumanization of Taylor Swift, I talked about how some of the Gaylors are engaging in a form of dehumanization. They don't actually view Taylor as a real person. To be fair to them, the thesis of that video is pretty much that both stans and haters of Taylor tend to dehumanize her, as stans and haters tend to do for every person they either valorize or demonize. Yikes. Fame is seen as something that removes one's personhood. But what if there is something there? Despite the Gaylors being made fun of, and despite the segment of them that are desperate to force a label onto a person they fundamentally do not know, many of them are doing something interesting and valid. They're engaging in a form of literary analysis called queering. When you queer a text, you are examining it for ways it might intentionally or unintentionally play into themes that go against cis heteronormativity. This is an example I've used before and will use again on future videos on queering because it's relatively brief and gets the idea across rather effectively. In the country song Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy by Big and Rich, the chorus goes, and the girls say, "Save a horse, ride a cowboy." Everybody says, "Save a horse, ride a cowboy." So first it's the girl saying it, then the singer goes, "Well, actually, everyone said it." It's not only girls who want to ride the cowboy. The boys and theys do too. But, you might say, what if the non-girls say that because they are cowboys trying to turn into rides? Well. In the second verse, the singer says, "I'm the only John Wayne left in this town." John Wayne was an actor known for Western films, a cowboy. The singer is making clear he is the only cowboy in the city. So when everyone longs to ride a cowboy, he's the only option. Though the singer sleeps with the woman in the song, it's clear that he's entered a town of open queerness, one he is aware of and is willing to brag about. Because everyone wants him. Man, woman, non-binary folk. You'll notice I haven't said anything so far about objectivity or the correct way to read a text. That's because, despite what some people believe due to hating high school English courses, analysis is not a maths problem. Objectivity is not what we're engaging with here. It is a way to read a text. Gaylors tend to analyze with the author in mind. They combine textual analysis with Taylor's personal life, at least the few details of it that they are privy to or have decided must be true based on general fandom nonsense overstepping and over-investigating the private lives of celebrities. You guys should work on that. The problem with that sort of analysis, when combined with the attitudes of some Gaylors, fandom culture at large, and more, is that it gets the entire concept of queering Swift's music labeled as the work of crazy people trying to force her to come out of the closet that they are certain she's hidden herself away in. Something, by the way, you shouldn't do to people who are queer either. Personally, I don't really care much for most author-centric analysis. I'm not saying it's wrong to do or not useful. It can be quite interesting. It's just not something I normally care about. And in this instance, I think an overfocus on it ends up being detrimental to the public perception of analysis itself. In a world where people are looking to read AI summaries of books and plenty of video essays that are themselves glorified summaries, this concerns me. I like analysis, I like talking about analysis, I like new ways of seeing, but I think there's a more fundamental problem a certain subset of Gaylors engage in, a problem that applies to most people actually, not just fandom types. That is an assumption that the speaker of a poem, the narrator if you will, is necessarily the same as the author of the poem. Now oftentimes these do link up, especially in the case of confessional poetry, but you cannot insist that this must be the case. As Swift revealed with Folklore, sometimes she writes narrative first-person poems about characters that she makes up. With that in mind, for the rest of this essay, I will not be engaging in Gaylor-ing the Taylor. Instead, we will be queering the songs of Taylor Swift. I'm not going to be playing any of the music or looking at music videos. We're going to be looking at and analyzing lyrics themselves. I'm going to use speaker instead of Taylor when discussing the narrator of a song, and when I use Taylor, I will be speaking about her as an author. Those are distinct categories. We won't be commenting on or even looking at Swift's personal life. For the purposes of this video, the author is dead. Now let's be Gaylors. TS1, Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift's self-titled debut album takes a bit of stretching to read any of it through a queer lens, but stretching can be good for both the body and mind, so get ready to touch your toes. In the song Tim McGraw, the speaker desires for their former lover, a man, to think of her when they think about or hear Tim McGraw, another country music artist. You could zoom out and imagine she desires a Pavlovian response. When he thinks of Tim McGraw, she wants the image of her, the feelings they spent together, to pop up. If happiness ought to inspire thoughts of the speaker in a little black dress, and if Tim McGraw makes this ex happy, then thinking of Tim McGraw, the country singer, ought to inspire the same feelings and thoughts as seeing the speaker in a little black dress. You can imagine this to mean he arrives at a place of subconscious arousal anytime Tim McGraw comes up. Bada bing, bada boom, the speaker is accidentally either deeply confusing a straight man or inspiring a bi-awakening. I think this is very funny. Now you might think, that's an insane way to read that song. And I agree. It's not really supported by the text either, but I'm including it here because it's fun. It's important to emphasize that there are levels to analysis, both in seriousness and rigor, which are not the same thing, by the way. That one wasn't particularly serious or rigorous. Analysis can be fun and silly and easily dismissible. That's fine. That doesn't mean it's not worth engaging in. It was fun to think about and relay that way of reading that song. If you can find fun ways of reading, even if they're not all that serious, you start to awaken a love for analysis itself and its sharing, regardless of how serious or rigorous that analysis is. I suppose you could say I'm engaging in propaganda for analysis itself in this video. Let's keep going. Picture to Burn is probably the first song from this album that comes to your mind when you try to associate it with queerness. It contains the lines, "So go and tell your friends that I'm obsessive and crazy. That's fine. I'll tell mine that you're gay." Now, this is a commentary on sexuality and gender, but not really in a queering way. It doesn't go against cis heteronormative standards. Rather, it kind of enforces them. The speaker is using the label of gay as something on a similar level to obsessive and crazy. Or perhaps it's meant to be an attack on this ex's masculinity. After all, he's a redneck in a pickup truck who always makes the speaker ride passenger. He's playing into a specific idea of what it means to be a man. For a long time, being gay itself has been seen as something unmasculine. The horror. You could see this as an attack on his very identity and performance then. Alternatively, if you zoom away from the vitriol, you can imagine the speaker and her ex engaging in the same performances to their friend groups. It's less about insulting the other, and it's more about removing any responsibility or heartbreak that might have come from the breakup. If he says the speaker is obsessive and crazy, then it's a good thing for his health that they broke up. He had no choice. It had to happen. Bullet dodged. If she says it's because he's gay, then breaking up was inevitable and out of her control. There was nothing to be done. Neither of them is publicly working through their own potential contributions to the end of their relationship. Performed necessity means no one you're close to will question your potential mistakes. In this case, gay would not be an insult. More interesting to look at from this album is the song A Place in This World. In this song, the speaker says, "I don't know what I want, so don't ask me. Don't know what's down this road, I'm just walking. Even though I'm not the only one who feels the way I do, I'm alone. I'm just a girl trying to find a place in this world." You could read this as an exploration of what it's like to be a queer person still in the closet, especially when no one around you is out. Or perhaps more accurately, someone who is questioning their sexuality and hasn't come down with a solid answer or identity. Don't ask me what I want. Please, please don't ask me if I'm straight or gay. I can't answer that. I don't want to answer that. It is scary. Don't know where I am, where I'm going, or who I am. The closet is an incredibly lonely place to be, even if you're just stepping in it to see if any of the clothes inside fit you. I grew up in a small town in Kentucky. I didn't know any other gay people for most of my life, and the few that I did weren't treated all that well. So when I was first coming to terms with my sexuality, I couldn't bear the thought of anyone directly asking me about it. It was too scary. I was alone on a road I couldn't stop walking down. A lot of queer people will talk your ear off about found family. RuPaul discusses chosen family on Drag Race all the time. The closet isn't just lonely because it's isolating or scary. It's because you start to see that the houses and communities around you might not be built with you in mind. So you start looking for a place in this world. The speaker is being rather general about the isolating human experience of the general human condition as seen through a feminine lens. It doesn't take much effort then to interpret it to be about any potentially isolating experience or identity. It's about coming of age, something that we're all constantly doing. In the song Stay Beautiful, the speaker and the women that she's observing all use the same description for a man named Corey. Beautiful. Now that might not strike you as strange or worthy of talking about in a video on queering, and I get that. As a gay man, I regularly use handsome, hot, cute, pretty, sexy, and beautiful to describe other men. Obviously, hot and sexy are used in erotic contexts. Cute is mostly when someone inspires in me a desire to hold or protect them. Handsome is fun to say, but it almost feels antiquated. When I call a man handsome, I really just mean that he's pretty, or that something he's wearing or doing with his appearance right then suits him. You look handsome in that suit is mostly talking about how the suit looks on him. But if I'm talking about aesthetic attractiveness, pretty seems more correct to me, and beautiful is the highest compliment. Beauty is an odd thing. We associate it with aesthetics, awe, and morality. When you call someone beautiful, what are you talking about? Is it all three? Normally, when I call a man beautiful, I am in some way thinking about his sum. Traditionally speaking, though, handsome is associated with masculinity and masculine features. A handsome woman, perhaps, is one with aesthetically pleasing features typically associated with masculinity. Beauty, on the other hand, is associated with femininity. To call a man beautiful might be seen as a comment on his feminine features or nature. To a man who is overly concerned with being a man, that can be odd. It can be an odd compliment to get. Those same types of insecure guys don't really take well to being called pretty or cute either. In part, we also have to look at this from the perspective of innocence versus sexuality. You do hear about in art history, ancient philosophy, and so on about beautiful boys. Cute is a word often placed on things of innocence and gentleness, pastels, small animals, children. Pretty has a connection to delicateness. Flowers are pretty because they are small and fragile. Innocent and gentle in stereotypical assumptions of gender dichotomies are seen as feminine qualities. But still, they all call him beautiful. Speaking of admiring traits on a man that, at least within the past few years, have been seen to be less masculine by certain people, regardless of the merits of that seeing, in our song, the speaker is infatuated with a rather romantic man. He leaves her flowers and notes for her to discover. In responses to her random musings, the speaker's beloved launches into poetic expression. This is pretty clearly about a heterosexual romance. It's technically more traditional than recent depictions of heterosexuality. You have the man being the one who longs, pines, and actively expresses romance and romantic desires. Chase or chased is often seen as a masculine-feminine dichotomy. So in a way, this is reinforcing a specific form of heterosexual courtship, a romanticized form you would see in old films. Yet, in current days, the very art of poetry is, by some, considered feminine. Intense interest in romance is also considered by many to be feminine. TS2, Fearless. In Jump Then Fall, the speaker talks directly to their unnamed and ungendered beloved. In order to make any conclusions here, we'd have to make a few assumptions about the speaker of the poem, such as that they identify similarly to Taylor herself as a straight woman, and so would be speaking to a man. If we make this assumption, we can see some interesting things happening. The speaker says, "I like the way your hair falls in your face." Long hair carries a connotation of either youth, think Bieber hair, or femininity. When fringe cultures adopt fringe as a form of rebellious style, it is, in a way, an aesthetic rebellion against the limitations and prisons of enforced masculine signifiers. More importantly, the speaker of the poem takes on an expressly protective role over their beloved. You could add protector protected to the list of dichromatic traits ContraPoints puts in her chart on default heterosexual sadomasochism. Well, of course, women can be protectors and providers, and men can be the protected and provided for. This sort of slots into ideas of lover-beloved, with the protected party being the beloved, and dominant-submissive, with the protector party being the dominant party. This isn't to say that these binaries are correct, by the way, or that you can accurately assume any trait one might have based on another. No. The point of this chart is that this is the relationship and sexual dynamic upheld in current assumptions, culturally speaking, around gender and gendered roles. In The Other Side of the Door, the speaker again uses the word beautiful to describe the man of their affections, several times actually. I won't repeat the same conversation from the last section here. It does seem like it might be a pattern for Swift the author, though, a degendering of the word beautiful. This continues in Hey Stephen in a way when the titular Stephen is compared visually to an angel, a creature of divine beauty. Not only is he beautiful, but so are the other women trying to court him. The specific angelic comparison comes back up in White Horse. Swift likes to write about speakers who fall for beautiful men. In You Belong With Me, we get the pick-me song of the decade, where the speaker insists that they are not of the high school female archetype, the ultra-femme cheerleader. On one level, the speaker is simply speaking out of envy. On another, there's a longing expressed for a partner who rejects an attraction to the feminine archetype both men and women are sold as the height of desirability for their age group. That's interesting. TS3, Speak Now. It took a while to find something to comment on in Swift's third album, Speak Now, but I managed to find a few things. In Mean, at the end of the first verse, where the speaker addresses someone who has been cruel to them, the speaker says, "You picking on the weaker man." While man here is likely meant in the generalized human way, it made me immediately think about Ursula K. Le Guin's essay introducing myself. That is a wonderful bit of writing that I do not want to go into detail for you, because I hope that you will pause this video now and go read it if you haven't beforehand. You can read the song Enchanted through the lens of someone who spots a gorgeous person they would like to flirt with, and yet they don't, because there's no telling if they too are queer, if they would accept the flirting or lash out. The text doesn't necessarily support that reading, but it doesn't not support it either. That's not really analysis per se, simply a way of experiencing that involves filling a piece of art with yourself, acknowledging the mutual consumption of taking in an art piece. In Better Than Revenge, the speaker metamorphosizes the man she and her rival are after into an object. In the chorus, the speaker says, "Soon she's gonna find stealing other people's toys on the playground won't make you many friends." On one hand, this is a metaphor to get across how childish and primal the speaker feels in their anger. On the other, it is an example of objectification. In fact, the metaphor is a more forthright application of it than what we generally think about with objectifying others. When this subject comes up, it's normally in conversations of men objectifying women, DHSM. Man is subject, woman is object. To quote a book I'm working on at the moment, Impossible Kinks, certain sex-negative feminists like Catherine McKinnon define gender, as opposed to sex, based on whether one is the objectified or objectifier, with all who are objectified being women. This would mean objectification is the mechanism through which patriarchy exists. So according to McKinnon, despite being a gay man, when I let other men objectify me, I become, in that instant, a straight woman. Real mind-blowing stuff going on there. If we apply that same lens here, then the speaker, through objectifying this man, is entering into a state of lesbian infatuation. Is that a sensible conclusion? No. But it is a conclusion. In Superman, we're back to calling men beautiful, even taking a phrase that traditionally uses handsome, tall, dark, and handsome, and instead substituting beautiful at the end. This is a really interesting trend to me. TS4, Red. I knew you were troubled as an interesting thing with changing pronouns. Much of the song is addressed to a you who has harmed the speaker. Every now and then the speaker throws in a he. Assumedly, this is just a slightly off quirk of the writing where the he that's spoken of is the same as the you. You don't have to read it like that though. In fact, you can read the song as being about 4 separate parties. The speaker, the treble, he one, the lover of the speaker, and he two, the lover of the treble. Or even that the speaker is currently with someone who has previously made the treble cry, or whose presence in the speaker's life causes the treble to experience jealousy, envy, regret, whatever you feel like they're feeling. I want to think about that second option though, with the 2 he's, the 4 people. In this case, the first he's long gone when he's next to me, the speaker's he, seems to be the emotionally disconnected current lover of the speaker. Perhaps this distance, he was long gone when he met me, implies the speaker is reminiscing on the trouble because she's with an emotionally unavailable man. Or perhaps the song is a narrative about how the speaker cannot get over the trouble and therefore was herself not emotionally available for this new relationship. It would seem that they're thinking of this past lover because he himself is currently going through relationship troubles with a man, or perhaps this man caused such pains to the trouble that he has become emotionally unavailable due to clinging to this past current or recurring love of his. Perhaps his boyfriend, whether ex or current, is what led him to becoming trouble. In the song 22, the speaker says, "I'm feeling 22. Everything will be alright if you keep me next to you." How do you make 22? Peace sign, peace sign. Put them together. What do you have? Lesbianism. TS5, 1989. It's time for the pop Bible, everyone. In the opening track, Welcome to New York, the speaker is going on and on about the exhilarating dreams, promises, and energy of moving to New York City for the very first time. If you're a fan of the album or of Swift, you likely know what line I'm about to bring up, and you can want who you want. Boys and boys, and girls and girls. Of the things the speaker finds wonderful, it's not merely queer culture or acceptance. It seems to be the relief at a lack of forced expectation. You can want who you want, whoever that might be. You are free. You can dance. Blank Space might be a satirical song about how the media treats Swift, but let's ignore that and queer it anyway. The speaker says, "I can make the bad guys good for a weekend." She can and will become the dominant partner. She can make men submissive and innocent. This is a role reversal. Femdom is seen as a kink. It is, in a way, deviant. And what heteronormativity despises most isn't actually homosexuality. It's any deviancy from what it believes ought to be a norm. So while a cis straight person into kinky stuff should not call themselves queer, do not do that, they are going against strict gendered expectations. Noting this is part of the queering process. It wouldn't be the best interpretation, but you could look at the speaker's lines, keep you second guessing like, oh my god, who is she? I get drunk on jealousy. And take away not that she enjoys seeming unpredictable, but that she likes flirting with women to get men jealous and question not only the men's relationship with the speaker, but the speaker's very sexuality and identity. The bridge is the most interesting part to me. Boys only want love if it's torture. In DHSM, the masculine is typically thought of as the dominant, the conquering, and the sadistic. But the speaker here claims that none of that is true. What men really want, she says, what makes them romantically invested, is the feeling of pain. They are the masochists. They long to be submissive, to be conquered, to be hurt. When we think of a heterosexual ravishment fantasy, we tend to imagine that men with it long to be the ravisher. But what if, as the speaker argues, they pretend to take that role in the desire because it's expected of them, while internally desiring quite strongly to be the damsel? It's an interesting argument. And I think one with some merit. When you look at alpha male spaces with all of these men performing masculinity, who are they performing for? Typically each other. And they search for even stronger men to guide them, almost as if what they want is a figure whom they can safely submit to, whilst failing to imagine a situation of submitting to a woman. In style, the speaker says, "You got that James Dean daydream look in your eye." Who was James Dean? a gay boy. In this line, she's basically saying, baby boy, you've got a sadness in your eyes that's only found in Eastern European gay porn. And I love that for her. Next up is I Wish You Would. The speaker, reminiscing on a past love whom she misses, says, we're a crooked love and a straight line down. The most likely reading is that they're otherwise well-behaved people, but their love is crooked. It does wicked things and makes them act out. But you can choose, instead, to read it that the speaker is generally straight, but for this one person, their love superseded her normal attraction pattern. It's the, I'm straight, except for you, thing. It's a really rare phenomenon, but it does happen, and would be something that would cause a relationship to stick out in a generally straight person's mind. They would think about it a lot. In Wildest Dreams, I just want to point out that this seems to be the first time so far that one of Swift's poems describes a man as handsome rather than beautiful. That has little to do with our current endeavor, but it stood out to me. The metaphors in Clean about flowers grown together, a drought symbolizing a breakup, and also a common phrase for periods of chastity, comparing this ex to a dress she wore, can be read through a sort of semi-erotic longing for a failed lesbian relationship. Have that in mind and read through the lyrics, you'll get what I mean. Again, it's not the most obvious reading one could have, but it is there. Wonderland has the speaker comparing a relationship to Alice in Wonderland. Now, they both fell down a rabbit hole. They arrive in Wonderland together. You could see this as saying together they represent Alice. They are of one. Is this the combination of the masculine and feminine into a singular whole person, with the trip into Wonderland representing maybe a mental breakdown that was simultaneously wonderful and pure horror? Or could it be two Alices? You also get the line, so we went on our way, two in love to think straight. You can read this as a playful line about the nature of their relationship, one that isn't straight. The vault track Slut sees the speaker not using beautiful or even handsome, but the culturally more feminine and daintier, more fragile compliment, pretty. I think that's interesting. TS6, Reputation. Are you ready for it? Don't Blame Me sees the return of objectifying men, once more equating them to toys. As a reminder, this is in contrast to the normal way of things, where women are the ones who are often objectified. If we go back to ContraPoints' DHSM chart, we see another interesting moment in these lyrics. My name is whatever you decide, and I'm just going to call you mine. Here the speaker is the possessing figure, a role stereotypically associated with the masculine. That possessiveness returns in delicate, as does the handsome description. It's been a second now since we've seen men called beautiful. If we zoom out, there's an interesting dynamic. You could say that Swift has gone from writing relationships between women and beautiful, though typically masculine men, to writing about relationships with handsome, yet submissive men. There seems to be a fascination with contrast between the outward and the inward. That's a trend, though I'm sure it'll get too messy real quick to draw overarching conclusions based on it, so just putting it out there and zooming away. Dancing with Our Hands Tied is another one of those songs that you can read through a queer lens and take it as being about a secret gay relationship, in this case beautifully tragic as it seems potentially doomed by the homophobia of the world. I loved you in secret. The speaker has a bad feeling, as if the world is against them, as if it'll destroy them, as if everything is bound to end. In a world of homophobia, gay relationships can feel scary and doomed. You had turned my bed into a sacred oasis. In the bed together, it isn't just about pleasure, it's about freedom. It's about respite from the world. There's no closet there. There's no doom. They dance no matter how doomed they are or how the world might try to stop them. They dance. Beautiful. TS7, Lover. In Cruel Summer, we're once again calling men toys. Then we get to the song that I really wanted to talk about, the primary reason I thought about delving into Swift's lyrics, a song I use as an example in Impossible Kinks, that book I'm working on, and I'm showing again, even though it's not out yet. The Man. In this song, the speaker imagines what life would be like as a man, or specifically, it's about how the media and the public would treat the speaker differently if they were a man. In this, sexual partners are called conquests. This is the sort of objectification of women that we're more used to. The speaker wouldn't just be fearless, trustworthy, or a leader, they'd be an alpha. They'd be the man, Leo DiCaprio. What is it when you fantasize about being more of a man or a woman? I'm going to quote from my book now, with some slight edits to match this video. Julia Serrano calls these feminine embodiment fantasies FEFs and masculine embodiment fantasies MEFs. Serrano argues that either of these sorts of fantasies can be experienced by any person of any gender, sex, and sexuality combination. I agree. This conversation is typically had about trans individuals, but what happens when a cis person experiences it? A common thought experiment slash joke on the internet sees a straight man wondering about what he would do if he woke up as a woman. Rather than talk about how he would explore his new body, there's a trend where he talks about how he would have sex with his male friends. It's tempting to say this doesn't count as an embodiment fantasy because the focus of pleasure is not one's own body, but that of others. However, it seems to me there's an underlying FEF beneath this. The desire is to experience the dual pleasure of giving and receiving sexual intimacy from one's friends. This fantasy can blossom out of an inability to consciously imagine oneself being on the feminine side of intercourse whilst in a male form. For some of these men, to imagine being penetrated, submissive, beloved, and so on requires an imagined scenario where they have transformed into a female body. In the shonen manga Naruto, the main character devises a transformation jutsu where he takes on the form of a naked woman. Read straightforwardly, this is an extension of Naruto's propensity for childish pranks designed to get him attention. However, if you approach the text from a lens of queering, wherein Naruto the character codes as a closeted gay teenager, this becomes a move to receive not male attention, but male desire. Many of the potential reasons for female embodiment fantasies apply to male embodiment and intersex embodiment fantasies. However, when experienced by women, trans men, or non-binary individuals, MEFs take on a political level. In a patriarchal society, power is typically held by men. In her song The Man, Taylor Swift fantasizes about what life would be like if she were a man. Despite being a heterosexual woman, Swift's non-erotic MEF involves her being romantically involved with women. This is because the fantasy is about being the stereotypically masculine male who embodies the ideals of default heterosexual sadomasochism. This is a will to power fantasy. It's a desire to not merely be free of patriarchy, but to experience the powers and privileges it grants. Book stuff is over by now, by the way. So we can see that male embodiment fantasies, like in this song, often lead to queer imagining. The speaker in The Man can imagine not only what it's like to be a man, but from the safety of saying it's what she'd be like as a man, she can also imagine what it would be like to engage sexually and romantically with women. And I think he knows. The speaker says, "He got that boyish look that I like in a man." This harkens back, I think, to the tendency to use beautiful rather than handsome. The speaker here implies an attraction to the appearance of innocence and youth, perhaps even a dislike of heavily masculine features, those that would imply perhaps corruption and age. The second verse in You Need to Calm Down is entirely about gay pride and pushing back against bigoted protesters at pride parades. Some people made fun of this song in the accompanying music video because it was focused on rural conservatives and Westboro Baptist church types. I remember there being a comment about it in a ContraPoints video, about how the real bigots that we should be concerned with now are more subtle and powerful with their anti-queer attitudes. That's right. Yet at the same time, as someone from the South who has spent most of my life in small towns and small cities, these types of people never stopped existing, and they regularly terrorize the queer people around them. They may not be the most powerful bigots, but they are there, and they do cause harm, and I don't think there's anything wrong with attacking them. Not like physically attacking them, I mean like verbally, like in this song. And if we're talking about power, these sorts of small bigoted communities have power over their locales. They vote, and those votes elect politicians. They affect local, state, and federal politics. It is good to point out their harms, give those who have been harmed by them the insight that others see and care about their pain, and to push back against these people. Making them look like backwards pieces of shit is helpful in this. That verse includes, "Why are you mad when you could be glad?" with glad being replaced by the LGBT rights organization GLAAD, GLAAD. It talks about pride parades and the people who protest them. If you've been on a college campus in the past couple of decades, there's a decent chance you've seen those preachers carrying the massive signs with the various sins on them, shouting at students as they walk on by. The speaker calls these types of people idiotic with a reference to the Dark Ages, which also serves to call them unenlightened, as in the Age of Enlightenment. They're barbarous morons with no self-control. That chorus changes, "Can you just not step on my gown?" to "his gown," also affirming gender non-conforming dress as well as drag. It's not my favorite Taylor Swift song either, but it is an explicitly pro-queer, pro-pride, pro-drag song from the biggest celebrity on the planet. That's a good thing. It is a morally good song to exist. Good on Swift for writing it. Afterglow is about someone who hurt their beloved, is acknowledging their mistakes, apologizing, and hoping they can fix things up. You can read it slightly differently, though. The first verse is clearly a metaphor, yet it also fits in with Swift's tendency to write about femdom and lightly implied BDSM. And afterglow is a word used for post-coital bliss. You can read this song as about a dominant woman who, during a session with her partner, went too far. This has a profound impact on both her and her submissive. She's apologizing and trying to calm both of them down enough to enter the aftercare period, to make amends, to exit the heightened state and emotions of the intense scene that they just played. Again, this is not the same thing as being queer, but it does push against many assumptions people make about the supposed roles of men and women. TS8. Folklore. 7 seems most likely to be about a childhood relationship and platonic love, but you don't have to read it that way. The speaker discusses the other's braids like a pattern, implying the beloved is likely a girl of her same age. Cross your heart, won't tell no other, love you to the moon and to Saturn. You can read this as being about a secretive, romantic, queer love. They kept it hidden from others, and perhaps this is what destroyed them. Then we get the abuse verse. The most obvious reading, and the one most likely meant by Swift, is that the unnamed friend literally hid in the closet to hide from the friend's abusive father. However, it can also be a promise that if the friend went to live with the speaker, if they ran away together onto the seas like pirates, no one would have to be in the closet. They wouldn't have to be scared of coming out. They could love forever, so deeply that tales of the two of them will be passed on forever. The speaker goes on to talk about this period of time as when she was uncivilized. This was when they loved each other. If you're doing a queer reading of this text, it takes on a note of tragedy. Despite being the one who insisted they could love each other openly and forever, as she grew up in a homophobic world, she was taught the expectations the world has for people, specifically that people be straight. She used to scream and be herself. She used to love who she wanted. And now she no longer does, only capable of thinking back to that one point in her life when she was free, something she longs for but can't bring herself to return to. It would mean giving something up. It would mean judgment. It would mean... Now you can also take the "before I learned civility, I used to scream ferociously" line as a slight subversion of contemporary/modern beliefs about gendered childhood behaviors. We tend to think of boys as being uncivilized and girls as being more mannered and mature. But that's not really true, like in a state of nature type of way. On one hand, we know that's from Swift's comments that Betty is a story song when she wrote about the lives of characters she made up, but the author's dead. We can take Betty in the same vein as the man from Lover, sort of male embodiment fantasy that allows the speaker to imagine what it would be like to love, long for, and hurt another woman romantically, something perhaps they're incapable of letting themselves imagine as a woman. TS9, Evermore. Gold Rush sees the return of Swift describing the romantic interests of her poems as beautiful. There aren't any gendered pronouns here. Taken in context with her other poems, Swift is likely writing about a woman who loves beautiful men. But if you operate under the assumption that beautiful is typically used to describe the feminine and have no context of Swift's past work, you could understandably assume the speaker is talking about a woman. No Body, No Crime is a country song about a woman committing murder, and that's like the gayest gay man thing possible. What happens if you read Dorothea as being romantic rather than platonic or being about an old acquaintance? You can either assume it's an open narrative of queer longing and sneaking around under the bleachers, or that it's another instance of a male embodiment fantasy. Many of Swift's songs are written without explicit pronouns for the beloved. I haven't been mentioning most of these, but it takes little effort at all to imagine them as being about a lesbian relationship of some sort. We're going to engage in that for the song Ivy, which makes me think of the relationship in season 2 of The Umbrella Academy. It's a bit of a trope, isn't it? The bored, comp-het housewife finds fire and passion in the thrill of the forbidden and the awakened queerness brought forth by some woman who stumbles into her life. Typically, that woman's a bit of a mess. It's pretty much the entire plotline of the TV show Killing Eve. So why did I pick this song? Is it simply because this falls in with the type of story that often gets told about queer women? Well, it's that and the fact that Ivy is a woman's name. You can imagine the metaphor of Ivy growing over the speaker as being sparked by the beloved being named Ivy. Cowboy Like Me is a really interesting song to queer. Cowboy has taken on a sort of gender-neutral connotation, but not entirely. If you take Swift's oeuvre up to now into consideration, you might take it more literally. What if this is another male embodiment fantasy? Only in this instance, she allows the speaker to yearn not for women, but for another man. Cowboys also happen to have a rich history of queerness. Cowboys are frequently secretly fond of each other, after all, taking bareback trips to Brokeback. There are skeletons in both our closets. It's a common metaphor, but if you're taking it to be queer, you can sort of say that they left behind their closeted selves, leaving only skeletons in the closet. Or perhaps that the destructive nature of being in the closet has harmed both of them, and these wounds plotted hard to fuck this up. The speaker, if a male cowboy, is openly queer, seducing and cheating old men who are infatuated with him. But their beloved has mostly been with women, perhaps because of the wounds of the closet. One who won't allow himself to deeply love, and another who wants to deny his sexuality. Those are hard hurdles to overcome, but they got their horses to jump over them. And now the cowboys are in love. TS10, Midnights. If you want to really get some stretching in, you could interpret Lavender Haze through the lens of a lavender marriage, a situation where a queer person marries a straight one or a lesbian marries a gay man so they can have the benefits of marriage or get people off their backs. The haze then could be just relief. If you see this through that lens, perhaps in a platonic way, then when the speaker talks about how people only see women as a one-night stand or a wife, it isn't just about the pressure of relationships under patriarchy. It's about friendship between men and women, and how society sees that as impossible, even if those men and women are incapable of being sexually attracted to each other. When I was in high school and college, despite being out, some of my female friends would tell me about jealous or otherwise weird comments made by their boyfriends about me. He's just pretending to be gay. He secretly wants to sleep with you. People can be weird in their insecurities. So that wasn't a particularly obvious or smooth reading of that song. Fair. Why have I been including ones that are stretches? I want to be clear that analysis can be more or less supported by text. They can be more or less convoluted. They can be fun, and they can be serious. They can be smart, and they can be dumb. Analysis itself is fun. What pictures can you make, and how clear are they? Mastermind, while not being queer itself, is another song pushing against DHSM, with the feminine speaker being the pursuer instead of the pursued. Femdom, boy sub. TS11, The Tortured Poets Department, and Down Bad, one of my favorite Swift songs ever, by the way, though nothing at all holds a candle to Slut. The speaker talks about how breaking up with him was like losing her twin. Dating someone who could be your twin? Very gay man coded. Fresh Out the Slammer sees the return of using pretty to describe men. Again, not necessarily what we're looking for here, but it's related and I think important to note. Florida, bum bum bum, features Florence and the Machine. Once again, this itself, very gay man coded. I Can Fix Him, No Really I Can, sees the return of Swift talking about a specific form of femdom. Taking a wild or gruff man, a bad boy, and turning him sweet and submissive, a good boy. The speaker even lays out orders and commands in the bridge with the use of good boy. Good boy. The speaker talks about seeing his potential for being one, unbeknownst to him. He had a halo of the highest grade. He just hadn't met me yet. He could be a wonderfully sweet good boy if only the right woman taught him. If she unlocked his submissiveness. This makes me think of Blank Space. I can make the bad guys good for the weekend. It's a topic Swift keeps going back to. She may be a straight woman, but she is not a subscriber to DHSM. She constantly writes poetry that pushes against it. And Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus, the speaker reveals their ex was some flavor of bisexual. Doesn't take too much digging to get that out of the lyrics. It's right there on the surface, but it's part of this whole deal, so I am mentioning it. 12. Gay End. So that's it. Those are the albums out as of time of recording. I didn't include any discussion or Easter eggs about Taylor's personal life that some Gaylors insist are there in her songs, things about supposed ex-girlfriends and ruined friendships and things like that. I find that sort of thing invasive and weird personally, so it's not my thing. The purpose of this video isn't to make a case about Swift at all. It's not about her personal life. It isn't even about finding the correct ways to read any text. It's about a way you can read any text. Sometimes you'll come out with new ways of seeing when you put those reading glasses on, and sometimes you won't come away with anything all that interesting. But the exploration itself is fun. Talking about it is fun. Like I mentioned earlier, you could queer plenty more of Taylor's songs. Many are addressed to a non-gendered you, which can be assumed to be a male, but whose maleness is not guaranteed. In a world wherein they were published as poems and you knew nothing about the author, there would be no telling the genders of the lover or the beloved. In those cases, you can read it as any combination possible. In that same vein, there are some songs that, if you completely kill the author, you can read them as gay male love songs, because while we assume the speakers are female due to Taylor Swift's femaleness, that gendered nature is not self-evident to the speakers of those poems. What I'm really doing here is propagandizing the fun of analysis. I'm trying to get across that it is a messy thing. It is not objective. You are not looking for correct answers. Art is not maths. A song is not an equation. A poem cannot be dissected scientifically. Dissection and analysis are fun. They're enjoyable. They are even more so when you share them with people. It doesn't have to be deep. You don't have to have grand arguments. You don't have to talk about being correct. It is important to look at the art you love and talk about why. It is important to talk about art. It is important to analyze art. Queering is one form of analysis. If it's not for you, that's fine. I personally find it thrilling. Then again, I'm a queer man. Queering comes naturally to me. Beyond simply being fun, it makes the world less lonely. It shows me I belong in various worlds and stories, so I can belong in this one. In my teens and early 20s, this was vital for me. Analysis isn't only fun or intellectually stimulating or a path forward for increased sociality and better art. It's often how we find ourselves. It's how we learn to see. It's how we try on new lenses and discover which ones match our natural vision. You can do this sort of thing with any art out there. You can analyze a child's scribbles that wind up on a fridge. You can dissect the deeper meanings of a Marvel film. You can look in awe at a blank canvas. Whether it seems simple or complicated, whether you like or hate the art, whether you find something to be well made or poorly made, or worst of all, middle of the road, you can analyze it. You can find something. It's vital that more of us fall in love with analysis. Taylor Swift jokes that she's an English teacher. If you are a Swiftie and you want to playfully go along with that, then you owe it to her to engage deeply with art. If it's hers or anyone else's, put yourself back in English class. Cast off the pressure of right answers, of tests, of grades. Open your mind, open your eyes, and play. Howdy, and thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share if you're feeling saucy. You can join me over on Patreon if you would like, wherein you'll get these videos and others early. You'll also get to have some fun behind the scenes access to some of my art projects, some more personal vlogging style content, and you'll just get to support me, and we'll get to chat about art a whole bunch, which is what I love to do most. You can go over to Amazon Smashwords or wherever you get your ebooks and purchase a copy of my poetry collections, Butterfly Snuff and A Museum of Art and Eggs, both of which are also available in paperback and hardback. I have a second channel where I'm just reading through a bunch of public domain stuff for the fun of it and through my own work, so you'll get readings of these poetry collections and some short stories and some longer form fiction when I get around to it, and some plays. And I have a third channel where I'm uploading my music and art instead of having it all clog up this channel. So go support those if you feel like it. That content, a lot of it will also be getting uploaded early to Patreon. So if you want all of my stuff in one convenient space, Patreon is the place to go, which would be really cool of you, you know? I hope you have a fantastic day. Do not be rude in the comments. Do not go and harass anybody. And I will see you next time.